All right, Maxime, thank you very much for coming to the early days of micromobility. It's an honor to have you here. I've read a lot about DOT. I've followed the DOT story since the very beginning. I love how you guys do things differently and how you actually put a lot of effort in what you say. So you actually execute what you say. So now that you're here, I would like to first discuss a little bit about you, your own background, what made you enter this crazy micromobility industry. And then we can go from there and talk about the whole crazy story and growth of DOT, but also of this industry. So thank you very much.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Constantine, for welcoming me. And I want to thank you also for creating, like an entrepreneur, this new podcast. Shared micromobility is a totally new industry. And I think, if there's someone like you who can tell the story from the inside and really talk and interview all the people that today are building this new shared micromobility world, I think, maybe it will be a piece of history in a few years. So thank you, Constantine, for that.
Well, the goal is to actually tell how it all started, because, most of these big companies started little. And most of them all know each other because we all started with Segway ES4.
not that.
Exactly. That's why DOT is different from others.
Yes.
And that is what I want to talk about, right? So please, before we go into the crazy growth of the industry, a lot of things happen. Tell me a little bit about your backgrounds. I know you have some background in supply chain as well. And I think you can see it as well in the way DOT differentiated at the beginning. You guys had a very strong team, with each team member having their own input. So tell me a little bit about you, but I want to know about your entrepreneurial story as well, because most people who will listen to this podcast know that as an entrepreneur, it's really a 24/7 job. You really give your life, and you have to be a little bit crazy, but also passionate. That's why Bike Twitter is very, passionate on Twitter. So please tell me a little bit about your drive and passion.
Yeah, so obviously it's very difficult to give a full picture of me in a few minutes. But at first I'm French. I come from Normandy, from Le Havre, which is a sea town, port, which was communist actually for a very long time.
Really?
A city also that was totally bombed during the Second World War and rebuilt. So people used to say that what's great in Le Havre, which is my hometown, is that you can still rebuild everything. So it gives a lot of potential. So maybe that's where I got my entrepreneurial spirit.
Well, now you are rebuilding the micromobility industry.
But I think reflecting back, it was a city which was only based on the cars. Like everyone was driving on cars, even to do a 500-meter trip to go to a shop. There were no cycling lane. The only other alternative you had was bus, but bus, was taking 30 minutes of wait, 1 hour wait, so it was not convenient at all. And just quickly reflecting on where we are and the change we are seeing, like if I'm going to come back there for Christmas to see my family, and I know already that now in this city there are cycling lanes, like literally like everywhere. There is an e-scooter operator. Unfortunately, it's not DOT.
I was going to ask when is DOT.
That's going to make me sad. I lost the tender. But the transformation is happening not only in the big cities, but everywhere in big cities, in smaller cities, like your city also in Kortrijk. So that's where I come from. And then I studied engineering, so that's my kind of problem solver aspect. Then I wanted as soon as possible to leave France. For me, it was depressing to stay in France. So I took the first job I could find, which was not in France, which happened to be in China, and was for Decathlon, a big sports retailer. Worked there in Asia for about 7 years, mostly in manufacturing and operations. And then I wanted to do something a lot more entrepreneurial. And so I joined a startup which was called Wayfair, which was an online retailer for home goods, built all their operations from scratch, then directed their business in Europe. We did a very successful IPO in New York. And then I was like, okay, like I it's great online retail for home goods, but in the end, it's about pushing people to buy more and more stuff. And for me, it's not at all me. I mean, like I rarely buy stuff, and if I buy, it's like something that really needs to last forever, basically.
Exactly.
So that was not my thing. And so I was like, okay, like I want to work in a field which links basically with my own personal belief.
Okay.
And so I looked, and I got very interested in the energy field and nuclear reactors. But it's another story. But I got also very interested in mobility or micromobility. Because
around what time was that?
That was in 2018, actually, beginning 2018. And the reason is because I lived in all these big cities, Bangkok, Guangzhou, London.
There they already had the bike share, right?
Singapore.
And China.
Yeah, but every time in these cities where I lived, like transportation was horrific. I mean, it was like huge amount of pollution. If you had to go in taxis or in cars, and you were getting stuck forever, basically in traffic and pollution. And if you were using public transportation, it was also usually not a very nice experience. And so I always thought, like, why are not people using, like bikes or things like that? And in 2018, when I was looking around, I got in touch with the people from OFO. The shared bike operator, Chinese, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I got really interested and really curious, because what's great, and I think they totally transformed the industry, and our industry today is because of what they did, right?
Exactly.
But what they did is really leveraging IoT technology
with the lock.
And smartphones, basically, to enable people with their smartphones to unlock bikes in the streets, track them, manage a fleet, and then let them lock it, right? And this was transformative, and I saw that. I was, wow, like this could be a great way to get a lot of people to use bikes in the cities, without having them to own or maintain basically a bike. And this is how I got into the shared micromobility industry, initially with OFO. And then I saw all the problems that existed with OFO.
I saw some
hardware,
pictures.
You saw the great, very artistic
bikes all over.
Pictures with a lot of bikes trashed. So there were a lot of issues, but I joined them initially, and then this is where I met a number of people, which were really passionate about the, basically bikes and micromobility and the impact it can have. We saw that, yes, it can work, we were putting bikes in the street. It was magic. People were using them without us having to do any advertising or anything, but, it did not work. And so it did not work because the bike's quality was not good, because the operations were not good, because the collaboration with cities was not good, because maybe the values, the culture of company was not great. And so that's when we decided, just after a few months, I only stayed at OFO 4 months. I learned, but then we said, okay, we can do it better. Let's build DOT as a European player, specialized in shared micromobility, and which aim from the beginning is to be a responsible operator. So that's a little bit my story. Sorry if it was a bit longer.
It's great to hear. But I would like to know, to know in which department of OFO that you worked at, just to know the experience that you gained there. And what I also want to mention as well, you also mentioned it here, is that they were really pioneers in turning a bike into a shared bike. And that really started the whole industry. I don't think they receive enough credit.
No.
But that is really the basic of what turns this industry really what it is, because they made sharing.
It was an amazing innovation, right? Before, there were already shared bike schemes, but which obviously were relying on stations, which was extremely inflexible. It was taking forever to register. Everything was really complicated. And suddenly,
very simple usage.
It was very cheap. People could really
very fast
lock bikes like in 30 seconds.
It was actually revolutionary the way it was execute it in terms of user experience because it was so simple to use that
Yeah.
it could be implemented, and the normal person can use it. You don't have to be like an IT person to use it. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm very thankful. I mean, for this experience, I mean, OFO in itself was a business disaster in the end, despite, having been very innovative. But for me, it was a great school because I was not coming from the mobility sector. In 4 or 5 months, very intense, I had really a crash course in micromobility, and I had a great learning of what not to do.
It's always
Which
great
I
to
used
learn what
after
not to
with
do,
Dot,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what I was doing otherwise, I was the head of the European business, and so my job basically at that time was to build the OFO business.
So it was more business development,
It was
or
managing all the
everything,
operations, everything.
like a general manager.
When I arrived, they had already started. So basically, they were already in trouble. So almost from day one, I had to lead a turnaround of the OFO business in Europe, cut the cost, and really make the operations a lot more efficient. But it was already too late. The company was basically bankrupt.
That's a great learning school, knowing that you founded Dot right after, right? Now it makes sense.
Yeah.
So that was in 2018, right?
2018, yeah.
And when did you do anything in between that, or did you immediately? So you found
No, we
team?
decided to close down the OFO business, I believe in July 2018.
Yep.
In the same time, we are so frustrated that we could not make like the shared bike dream happen with OFO, that with a number of the people from the OFO team, we said, okay, let's do it ourselves. And so we started the project of Dot in July 2018, officially August 2018. We incorporated the company beginning of October. We raised, and then we launched operations in February 2019 in Brussels. So it went very quick. Yeah.
But when you started with Dot, so you had an amazing team. First of all, congrats with that, because I think that is at the basis of the initial growth of the startup, having a great team as well. That is complementary, right? Because you need to have the people who can, help you and be good at their thing.
Yeah, a company only exists by its people, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but Dots started with their own hardware, if I am not mistaken. So, can you please explain a little bit the process between starting Dots or leaving the previous company and then launching in Brussels, which was not that big of time in between, but it takes a lot of time to have a good hardware like Dot.
So I think when we started Dot, we knew from the beginning that hardware is really important, right?
Yes, it's key. Yeah.
It leads all the unit economics. It is what makes ride experience safe or not for the user. It has obviously very big environmental impact depending if it lasts or not.
Exactly.
And overall, it's obviously a big part of the user experience itself.
And the loyalty and stuff.
And the loyalty and everything. And so when we saw like that the first shared e-scooter operators were using a scooter which was made for individual consumers for the private market, and that they were getting destroyed basically very quickly, we thought, well, there's no way we are going to start with this type of what was the Segway or Ninebot e-scooter. There's no sustainable business with this kind of hardware. And so we were very clear that we would never start actually with this kind of hardware. What we knew is that we needed like shared e-scooters which were built
for sharing,
for shared sharing, for
but
shared
at that time, there was no one doing it.
At that time, so we found basically a Singaporean guy which is called Daniel, which had already worked for a few years in the e-scooter industry.
Oh, wow.
And so together with him, I went in August, actually 2018, in China. And we went to screen all the suppliers we could find that were producing e-scooters in China. And we found one supplier which had basically designed an e-scooter specifically for the shared mobility market. So what it meant is that this e-scooter was built much more to be durable, so it was much more
so
robust.
The lifetime was
exactly.
higher.
It had
the
also
wheels.
like the bigger wheels. It had a larger deck, and it had also proper mechanical brake. Now it seems
I remember
it
you
seems
were the
basic,
first.
but at that time there were only electrical brakes, which was extremely dangerous, right, when you are going downhill. But it had a mechanical brake, and so just these features like the big wheel, the mechanical brake, the large deck, we said, okay, like this is like, you know, what we need to get started. So the story is that it was not our own design. We made some modification on this design, but it was not our own design because you need a lot more time to do it.
Yeah.
And so that's the design we use. At the time, indeed, when we launched in Brussels and in Paris, in Lyon, we made a massive difference because we are the only one basically which had an e-scooter which was comfortable to ride, safe to use with the mechanical brake, the big wheels, and also was much more durable. And for the story, this e-scooter that we launched about 3 years ago is still being operated. It's not operated in Brussels, but it's operated in Poland because just the cost of operating it is more expensive than the newer generation. But it's still being operated, and we just decided after analyzing the durability of the product that actually we would continue to operate it for a fourth year, which is pretty amazing. We would never have thought about it. Like 3 years ago, the discussion was, okay, would it last 3 months, 6 months, or 9 months? That was the type of discussion.
But you guys actually set the standards of the the quality of the scooters, basically, because I remember when I was working in Brussels.
Yeah.
When I saw a DOT scooter and I tried it, I mean, the experience on the cobblestones, it was way better.
Which is very brutal in Brussels.
Yeah. And
now, what we say is like, if we want to test a new e-scooter, we always go to Brussels because the cobblestones are the most horrific one across Europe. I mean, Rome is pretty good also for that, but Brussels is definitely at the peak. So if you pass Brussels, you are good.
I mean, Brussels has a lot of difficulties, I would say, because sometimes a certain percentage might end up in the water or on the highway. I remember these things happened, but you guys really, in my personal opinion, set the standards for the industry to kind of like build on top of what you already have. Because I think with the iterations, maybe not the next one or the second one, but from the third one, then they could not come back with a scooter that looked like, not a shared scooter, like maybe the ES4. It had to have at least the minimum specifics like the DOT one had, the big wheels, the suspensions. I mean, because otherwise, the users would. I mean, I would not use it. I only used Lime or DOT because Lime also had a pretty good scooters even back then, I think.
Yeah. Ours was better, but
I mean,
with all due respect, Lime.
But I think Lime scooter, the original one, is still being used in Prague.
Yeah, there are still cities. But they had bought a lot of them also.
Yeah.
So
I think that is also sometimes a story that needs to be discussed, because in the news often it's about scooters are not durable, they only last 3, 4, 5, 6 months. But I think sometimes it's also good to look at the stories or the companies that actually put time, efforts, and a lot of money and building a durable scooter for the long term, and seeing that it's still being used now.
Yeah, and I think,
because
unfortunately, it's true that the industry has still a bad image because of the beginnings with the e-scooters, which were made for individual consumers, and especially in the US. But now, honestly, I think the whole industry is using e-scooters that are quite robust. Not only DOT, everyone. And I think, generally speaking, the e-scooters, have multiple years of.
But that's
of
because
life,
they are all using the same companies.
True. But the criticism, about the industry in relation to the lifetime of the e-scooter, I think, is not anymore.
No, it's not
doesn't
the
reflect
current
the
situation
reality of now.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's something that I also definitely want to discuss. Is I feel like we went through a lot of years. Did a lot of pivots. Obviously, we went through a difficult time with Corona, But a lot of companies came back stronger, I would say, and they are now bigger than before. And I think seeing that companies are raising a lot of money right now, it's high valuation. I think now it's time to not focus on, burning the cash with operation, but actually focusing on long-term decisions, things that can be durable, whether it's investing in like hardware that can be, for the long term, for example, or whether it's focusing on improving the operation. That's what I feel, because we spend a lot of money that we just burned because we did not manage the operations that good at the beginning. And to be fair, the industry was moving quite fast.
Yeah.
So it was hard to catch up and to actually manage the operations at the very beginning, because everybody was learning along the way. That's what I feel. But I feel like now we reached a level where we have some experience. I'm talking about the industry, where we should focus more on durable things rather than burning cash. But I want to know your opinion, because I'm just like the listeners, or most of the listeners, is just an outside perspective, right? So I don't know how it actually is to manage a big company like Dot.
Yeah. So I think on one side, it's very clear that, like mobility, there's a revolution in mobility right now, right? All cities are moving to micro-mobility, thereby building cycling lanes, and people want to also more and more use micro-mobility vehicles in cities. So it's a huge transformation, right, which is going on. And cities, they also want actually to have shared micro-mobility operators to offer this shared micro-mobility service to people, right, to replace cars and so on. So basically there is a huge, from a pure business perspective, there is a huge market opening, right? And so there's definitely, for the key operators in that market, there's definitely a speed aspect, right?
They need to answer the market, right?
If you want to be in this market, if you want to be able to answer to the needs of cities, you need to be able to expand quickly, to buy or invest in the capex, or to buy all the e-scooters, e-bikes, or whatever you need to fulfill these needs. And this requires a lot of money, right?
Of course, yeah.
And you don't have the time for that to access to debt, or to basically be profitable to get to these markets. In the same time, it's very clear also that unless you can turn your business to be profitable, especially at city level, where you have positive return on investment on the vehicles that you are purchasing, well, obviously, you will never be profitable as a company. You will never be able also to access to debt, to finance your vehicles, because that's what banks are looking at. Okay, is it a profitable company? Do they have a positive return on investment? And if you can't achieve that, it means that ultimately you always rely on equity or capital to be sustainable financially as a company. And obviously, this cannot last forever. So this is really I think the tension that the big operators have is like, okay, like on one side, I have to expand because there are all these market opportunities are opening. And I'm not sure that, once there are operators in these cities, that I can still enter this city. And in the same time, they know very well that, okay, but in the same time, I have to make sure that I am profitable, because at some point I won't be able to raise money anymore as easily, right? And if you want to be profitable, obviously, then you have to focus on really good hardware, really good maintenance, really good operations, and really control all your costs all the time, right?
Exactly. That's a great point. But I think, besides from the business aspect, we also need to not forget that we are in the sustainable, business, right? So at a certain point, our business model needs to become sustainable as well, right? Because we are pushing the sustainable model. So at certain point, we should also be sustainable, I think. Because it's true that we need to answer the needs of the demand and the market. But at some point, you also need to make sure that you are sustainable in terms of your operations, because you want to have a positive impact, right? For the climate, for the nature.
Yeah. And for that, for us, the values of the company have been always very important. And the first brainstorm we ever did, actually, which was in August 2018, with just, I think, 5 or 6 people, was what kind of culture do we want to build within that, which will make us happy and proud to work for this company, but will make also the company successful. I won't, bore you with, which values we chose and so on, but basically the big thing for us was, how do we build a responsible company? And the way to look at it, I think fundamentally, is when you have decisions that you need to make, is it good for our employees, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it good for the cities where we are operating?
Exactly.
Is it good for the planet from an environmental perspective?
Yeah.
And also, is it good for our shareholders, or from a financial perspective? Because otherwise you have
so you need to find a balance.
And it's all the time like you have to try to tick the box on these 4 dimensions. And usually if you tick the box, if it's yes on these 4 aspects, usually you are making sound decisions for the business, right? It's not always in short term exactly aligned, but in long term, generally speaking, it always
makes sense
aligned.
when you look back. Yeah, I was just going to ask.
For instance, a simple example is like, like at the time when we started, do you buy a Segway? Or do you buy, something much more robust? If I buy the Segway scooter at that time, well, I can get it very quickly. I can go very quickly on the market. But obviously the problem is they are not going to last very long. So probably it's not going to generate a very positive return. Yep. So if you take the long-term perspective, okay, having a robust hardware and safe was the good decision for our users, right? It's safe for the cities because it doesn't generate, waste everywhere. It was good for the planet because it lasts, and it was good for our shareholders because obviously we are still operating them 4 years later, right? So that's the framework, if you like.
That's amazing because
very simple.
Yeah, I mean
very basic.
It's very simple when you explain it, but I think back in 2018 when you were executing, it was probably a bit difficult because that was the only one, I think, that focused on these kind of things, like on the durability of the hardware. And I'm not really wanted to expand very fast, but was very cautious in how you expand it, and also I think where you expand it.
Yeah.
Can you enlighten me a little bit on that? Because
true. I mean, there was this tension, right, where it's a new industry, so a lot of money coming in.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously there is a huge pressure to do what's called blitzscaling.
Yeah, exactly.
So which is to grow as fast as possible in as many markets as you can, right? And we took a very different view, which was like, we need to master the business first, our operations, the user experience, before we expand. And so we took a very conscious decision to say, okay, we are only going to go first to 3 cities, which were Paris, Brussels, and Lyon. Yeah. And a little bit like a concept store type of approach, which is pretty popular in retail. We are going to test basically our operations like a pop-up.
Exactly.
We are going to test our operations, refine it, and make sure that it generates a very good user experience, that we offer reliable service, and that we are able to do it in a cost-efficient way or profitable way. And once we perfect or refine the model, only then we are going to replicate this model in many more cities, right? Yeah. And this is what we did. So the first year we went to very few cities. The second year we were much more confident. We had COVID, unfortunately, but we expanded a lot more, and now we are in about 31 cities across Europe. Yeah,
I think there must have been a certain pressure because you obviously also raised quite an amount of money at the early stage.
Mm-hmm.
So you could have easily, expanded fast, like what everybody was doing, but you decide to do what nobody was doing actually, and I think that was a little bit risky, but it worked out in the end, right?
Yeah, I think it's because we took the long-term view, right?
Exactly.
You have to find the right balance, but if you care about your investors, even, not even talking about in the environment, if you care about your investors, well, you don't want to take the risk of buying a lot of really bad hardware
because
that is only going to last 6 months, which is literally what happened to most operators, except Dot, right? And that's just wasted money, right? And so we care about our investors, we care about their money, and so we say, okay, like we are going to make sure that it's well invested, and we'll be careful. And once we are confident we can generate a return, we are going to expand. And obviously, you could give the same argument about the environment, about the way you operate in cities, building very good experience and collaboration with cities, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think it worked out very well because your local strategy is, it's working out pretty good, right? You have a very good presence wherever you are. I think wherever you operate, Dot has a lot of loyalty from the users, but also has a good relationship with the city and works together with the community. And also the fact that you employ the people there plays a huge role. And I think that makes a difference ultimately in the long run as well.
Yeah, that's definitely, I think, a key aspects of Dot that you highlighted, which is, one of the key decisions for us was, choosing a really robust and long-lasting and safe hardware. Another one was to go very slow and just, a few cities first. Let's perfect the model and let's expand. And the third decision we took was to have our own in-house operations from day one. And the reason we did that was that first, if you want to build a very good partnership with the city, it's very hard to know if you don't control your own operations, right? And so you have your own people. Well, if they're not happy about something, okay, we'll fix it, because we do it ourselves.
Exactly.
It's also important in our view because if you care about the safety of your users, well, you want to make sure that the maintenance is very well done. And if you outsource it, it's very hard to be sure. We thought it was very important to have our in-house operations also because that was the way for us to control all the costs, right? We had visibility on all the costs, and so we could say, okay, we are spending a lot of money on this. Let's, fix the hardware to prevent that, or let's, improve our software so that we can minimize costs. And so then you can really continuously iterate and improve because you are learning through your local teams, right? And so this is what we did, and part of it is also that all our employees are shareholders in the company, which, I think there is a difference if you feel that you are also an owner of the company. You don't act the same way as if you are just paid, right?
Yeah, exactly. And one thing you mentioned about sharing the knowledge, I think when you employ the people, they learn, but them learning is actually the company learning as well because the knowledge kind of stays in the company, right?
Yeah.
In a way, if you outsource it, I mean, these companies that you outsource it with, they work together with other companies, right?
True. No, it's true.
Yeah, so
it's like either you are doing a very good job at managing a 3PL, third-party logistics company, but then they are learning from you, and then they pass this learning to competitors. Or you are doing a poor job, and then obviously you have poor results as well.
I think that is one of the what makes Dot so different and so good compared to others is the knowledge that you gained over the years, the way you operate and so on, and the operations. But what I also wanted to know is how do you decide to which city or market you want to move on next? Like, what are the key things that you look at? Do you look at, the current issue in that city in terms of mobility? Because, as some European cities, they really, really need some shared mobility, and, it's a bit hectic. Or do you look at the culture maybe, or do you look at your competitors that go there? Because often when one operator goes there, 3, 4, 5 follow, maybe not that much, but a lot follow in the coming months. Yeah. So, but with Dot, I saw that the expansion, in a way, you did not follow along where everybody was going.
Yeah, I mean, we are fairly selective because also we want to spend carefully, let's say, and make sure there's a good return. But No, I think what we look at, generally speaking, is one the size of the market. So like how big is the opportunity? We look at the regulatory aspect. So first, are we welcome or not?
Which plays a big role.
Will there be a tender or not? Will it be a protected market? In general, we prefer protected markets, so tender-regulated markets, because we can then invest in a much more sustainable way. Three, we look at the infrastructures. So,
the roads and stuff.
People that or our users have a safe experience in that city or not, if they use our e-scooters or our e-bikes. We look...
what about the demographics? Because
we look a little bit at demographics, but it's not necessarily a key input, because we consider that eventually we are really serving everyone. We are not serving a specific group of people.
Because I'm in bike share. I used to be in scooter share.
Yeah.
What I noticed is that with bike share, you have the demographic is bigger, right? You have the women, men, young, old. But with scooters, at least back when I was still operating, people were a bit afraid to use them. I guess now it's changed with the quality that changed, of course, and you guys set the standard.
Yeah.
But I was wondering if that was still a key thing. Because
now we are both an e-bike and an e-scooter operator, right? And the reason to add the e-bike was part of it was this, right? Which was like the e-bike, they are more attractive for, let's say, the older segment of the population, but also women, actually.
Exactly, yeah, women.
And the e-scooter were more attractive, at least till now, for, let's say, younger people and men.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's changing, actually, because we see is that there is a bigger and bigger proportion of women that are using our e-scooters. And we also see that the average age of our user is progressively increasing. So
that's quite interesting.
But it's still the case, right?
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is overall is our goal as a company, the mission of our company is to free our cities with clean rides for everyone. And the for everyone is very important for us. What we are looking at is eventually like all the trips that are non-walkable and that are non-public transport, we want basically to offer a service for them, a solution for that. Yeah. Whether it's an e-scooter, an e-bike, and maybe some other vehicle types.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I discussed this with Scott Shepard, who has a lot of experience in public transport. I think it's not really about banning certain mobility modes. It's more about finding a balance, because you might need a car to, even if it's a shared car, to go to IKEA, for example. You cannot take
a cargo bike or a small car.
Or a cargo bike,
for
right?
families, it's very clear that a single rider e-bike or an e-scooter is not the most convenient vehicle, right? Even though you can see families on e-scooters, it's not supposed to be. And so it's very clear that in the shared micromobility space, there are still vehicles that need to be added to fulfill all the needs. Right?
Yeah, actually, you mentioned cargo bikes.
One interesting thing is also like something that we don't talk too much in this industry is disabled people, right?
Yes.
And today, someone who is on a wheelchair, once he goes out, let's say, of his flat, right? Generally speaking, they cannot use public transport because it depends the countries, but in most cities, they cannot access to it, right?
It's
the
very
stations are not built for it.
They need to call up front to be able to
They cannot really use the cycling lanes because they are too slow, right? Mm-hmm. Because on the wheelchair. Yeah. And they cannot obviously use the shared micromobility service because it's not built for them, right? Yeah. And I think there is really an opportunity also to build solutions for disabled people.
And that is something the company is thinking about.
This is definitely something that we are working on, and I'm not saying we are necessarily the only one. There are also other companies, but I think what we'll see is that in the coming years there will be new solutions that will come up specifically designed for disabled people. So I think that's very interesting, because suddenly, if we can do that, it will give a lot more freedom for disabled people, right?
That's really nice to know, because then you focus on providing access to mobility to everybody, right?
Yeah.
Inclusion and
Yeah.
that is what it's all about
Yeah.
ultimately, right?
Yeah.
So that's really nice to know. You just mentioned cargo bikes. They are coming up heavily. I think in Germany there are some cargo bike shared companies. Is this something that you also think about or explore, or because they do have a certain
we see the
benefit, I would say, but
let's say that we see
I'm not sure about the market.
we see the complement how complementary basically cargo bikes can be
For
to
delivery, it's
to
good.
bikes or to I mean, but for families
Exactly.
or for carrying
Here,
goods,
there are lots in my village. There are lots.
and there are companies. There are two, for instance, in the Netherlands, which are BackMe and Cargoroo, which have started. And people like them, right? And so I really believe in this as a complement. It doesn't mean necessarily that as DOT we want to do it ourselves, but we might partner with companies that are doing it because we definitely see the synergies between what we do and what they do.
Yeah, exactly. And I think for in the center of the city, it really makes a lot of sense to if you have like families or if you have like deliveries or delivery companies to work with cargo bikes, because sometimes with vans or big cars, even here in Belgium, I think in Ghent, you have these zones where you cannot enter with certain cars that are older than 2011 or something. So then the next best option could be like a cargo bike, right? And I think that is an evolution that might a trend that might come more often in the future, I think.
Quite possible, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So what I also want to discuss is the expansion. We already briefly discussed the expansion, but you can expand in different ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can do it, in-house, having your own team, building your own team locally, which is what I actually was able to do with Uber when, we launched here in Brussels. That was my very first internship, which I learned a lot, like you. And I used that knowledge to, start my own company. But we see that a lot of other micromobility players also look at other options to expand fast. So instead of using their own team, they acquire a local team or the local operations of a company. And a way, obviously that company already has the local knowledge and there are some things that you don't have to go through anymore. And I suppose they also have a good relationship with the city officials and so on. And that plays a role in terms of expanding in that neighborhood or region. I just wanted to know whether what is the DOT strategy, because are you also looking at these type of strategic ways of expanding, or are you still following the original model where you want to go a little bit slower but do it on your own and start from zero, because it doesn't mean that one is better or bad or good, right? I think they all have their positives and negatives, right? It's more about finding a balance, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think our goal as DOT, as I said, is to free our cities with clean air for everyone. So in a way, what we want is to be able to achieve that and to do it in a responsible way. Then, generally speaking, we want to do it with our own team and with our own methods, processes, and tools and so on. But, if we see an opportunity where there's a great team, in a specific region or a specific city that shares the same values as us, and for whatever reason, wants to join us basically, and do it and want to do it together, then obviously would be probably interested to do it. Obviously, so far from a business perspective, we can do it also in a way which creates value for shareholders, right?
Exactly.
And so what we have seen, at least on our side, is that we definitely looked at some of these opportunities, but every time either there was I would say a cultural disconnect where we did not feel that we could basically the culture of the local team would match basically who we were as Dot, and so then it cannot work. Or from a monetary perspective, we could not see. We thought like, okay, the cost of acquiring this
just doesn't
company
make any sense.
it doesn't make sense compared to what we think is the value actually of this market. And then, caring about our investors, we say, okay, no, we are not going to do it.
Okay, that's good to know. What about data? Because I always say mobility is really about changing people's behavior. It's about changing the habits, and to be able to change the habits, you need to understand the people, right? You need to understand how they move, so that you can provide the solution, the mobility solution they need for that certain specific demand at that point, right? Yeah. So you need data, I believe. How has DOTS been using data to improve or to make your solution better, if you have? And are you thinking about behavioral change yet, or how do you see that?
Yeah, so from a data perspective, so we have a team, I think, of about 30 people that are just focused on data, so data scientists, data engineers, data analysts, working on different aspects of the business. So one is operations, but obviously there is all the user side, there is the financial side, and so on. And one of the things that they are definitely working on is, okay, how can we increase the availability of our vehicles for the users, so that when they need it, where they need it, they will be able to access to, or they will have a vehicle, let's say, within 100 meters, right? And so that's what the team does. So they build models, to basically forecast the demand. And really, their goal is to improve the availability basically of these vehicles, and then the way you do it, there's obviously rebalancing operations. There's a lot of things that you can do in terms of behavioral change.
Well, it's a long-term process, right?
It's a big thing, but I think fundamentally what you want is how to make shared mobility better, or than using a car, or than using a taxi, or than maybe even using public transportation for short distance trips. How do you do that, right? And I think it's all about reliability.
Availability,
it has to work all the time whenever I need it. It has to be reliable. I have to be able to count on it.
Great hardware.
Has to be available, right, where I need it. Has to be affordable also. I can basically pay for it every day. It has to be safe, right? So, if I have to worry that I get crashed by a car, it cannot be something I use every day, especially if I'm a father or a mother, right, with kids. So there are all these things, right? And this takes time, but I don't think it's really about like changing the behavior or the mindset of people. For me, it's much more by creating the conditions by which suddenly there's no, it's obvious shared mobility vehicles or services are the best solution for me to move around for short distance trips. And I will give you an example. I was in Brussels a few weeks ago, and I was looking at all the transportation solutions. I was in an area of Brussels which is called XL. And I think it was maybe 3 kilometers from the train station or something like that. And so I was looking at all the solutions out of curiosity, and it was very interesting for me that taxis, for instance, you needed to wait between 10 and 15 minutes, and then it was taking 20 minutes to get there. So basically it was taking about 30 to 35 minutes, and it was expensive, right? Public transportation, I think, was about 30 minutes or so to get to the train station. And then you had like these shared e-bikes.
The scooters are the best.
Shared e-scooters, obviously among them Dot, but which was taking about, if I remember well, about 15 minutes, cost a few euro, right? And in effect was the most efficient solution to get there. And I think if you get to that point where on top of that it's always available and so on, then that's when you drive change, because people say, oh wow, actually the best for me, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It makes
and
sense.
on top of that, it's sustainable, right? So
Yeah, exactly. It makes sense when you're in that situation to use like a shared mobility because
Yeah.
it's the best option, right?
Mm.
But I think to be able to achieve that level where you're always available and reliable, I think there needs to be also different modes of bike share, scooter share, because sometimes you might need to go a little bit further than 5 kilometers, right, or whatever, and then a bike share, a bike might be useful, right? So I think to reach that level, offering different possibilities of transportation is a key. And I think that's where you are going.
Definitely. Electrical bikes obviously are more suited for longer distance trips, but fundamentally, I mean, micro-mobility is never going to be for very long distance trips, right?
It's in the name, right?
It's micro. I think for macro, that's where trains and public transport in general will be much more efficient. Yeah.
Actually, how do you look at mass? Because now that we are on the subject of different modes of transport, I believe mass 2 years ago, they were coming up. Obviously they had some issues with the payment and so on, but they had a lot of opportunities to provide a good added value for the people, right? Because at that point there were so many different operators.
Yeah.
That's in a certain city, maybe even Brussels, you had like 4 or 5 scooter operators, and as a user, it makes sense. I mean, it made sense if you had one app to use all of it. But I'm not sure if they were able to achieve that, that offering yet. But now I see that there are some super apps, like Uber is also offering the Lime scooters, and also Uber Eats in the app, which is amazing. I use it. I use it a lot. But I think Uber also has public transport in the United States. I'm not sure, but I think I read it somewhere. So I see that these micro or mobility companies some of them are going in that direction. I was wondering, I haven't seen it that much in Europe. I was wondering if that is something you guys.
Yeah, there's a bit of mass is the kind of graal of mobility, right?
It's very like visionary, right?
This kind of platform which will incorporate all the mobility services in a kind of seamless way for the users, right? It's like
keyword
the dream,
seamless.
the dream. The reality is, I think the prime is that the mobility market overall is extremely fragmented, especially at city level, because at city level you have usually a local public transportation company which has a monopoly, so they do whatever they want, right?
They need to be involved.
They
work.
might accept to join a platform, they might not, and then obviously a lot of the operators are also fairly careful because they don't want another platform to basically control the user experience or the pricing. And so I don't know. I think on our side, we are open for it. The most important, at least for us as DART, is to maximize the usage of our fleet. And so to some extent, we don't really care like where the users are coming from. They might come from the public transportation app. They might come from, I don't know, a taxi sharing company like FreeNow or Uber. They might come from another mass platform. They might come from one of our competitors where we have a partnership with. So far, that drives bigger usage of our fleet and a better user experience. We are happy with that, That's it.
So
so our goal, if you like, is to get people to use our micromobility vehicles one way or the other,
Okay, so how do you actually, now that you talked about partnerships, how do you look at partnership with different operators, like public transit? Do you have any public transit partners, for example? I know in Germany and Zurich also, a lot of operators partner with public transport, and in Germany as well. Is that something that?
Yeah. So we already have a multiple partnership with public transport companies. So in Paris, for instance, there is the RATP. In Brussels, there is the SCIB, if I'm not mistaken.
SNCB.
SNCB. And so in the key cities, generally speaking, we aim to have partnership with because we really see ourselves as complement of public transport.
But how does that partnership work actually?
In most cases today, it's still quite limited, and the limitation comes from also the technical ability of these public transportation companies.
I assume there's no connection in terms of technology, or
generally speaking, they want to integrate basically our service into their own app service, right? But they might not necessarily always be ready for it. So if they're ready, great, then we integrate. If they're not ready, we might do some other partnerships while they get ready, right?
But that's creating a mass, basically, almost. I think mass actually should be, partly supported or funded by the public sector, I think, because, as you said, the transportation agencies have a monopoly often. Not all. I mean, actually, always.
No, but you're right. I think what you want to avoid is to have a monopoly where, like for Google in advertising, right? Google today has a monopoly in online, or not a full monopoly, but has some kind of monopoly on online advertising together maybe with Facebook, right? Or Meta. That this is, I think, something we should aim, if we can, to avoid in the mobility sector.
Yeah, exactly. Because, monopolies don't always and good for the end users, because once you have the monopoly, then you have the monopoly pricing, and then that's a bit the story, right?
Yeah.
All right. So I just forgot my question. Yes. Let's talk about SPAC and IPO. After, I think this trend started maybe around the COVID lockdowns or just after, where everybody was starting to do SPACs. Even my accountant did a SPAC. I did not even know, but I saw it. So how do you feel about the SPAC in our industry? Because in our industry, it's coming up, and I think that is, some companies, especially in Europe, also in America, it's already happening. They are leaning to, they are preparing to go to the IPO, to the SPAC. I think that's a bit the goal. How do you feel about that, and how do you think that might impact the industry, and in terms of the way
I don't have a very strong view on SPACs or IPOs. I think, generally speaking, the prime with SPACs is that there is much less accountability required for the firms that go for a SPAC. And I think that might, that creates some risk, I think, in terms of if there's a lack of transparency, if I think there's much bigger risk, I think, in general for the shareholders or the investors. And I fear that there might be ultimately quite a few bad stories coming out of these SPACs. But then, it's also a much easier way for startups to do a sort of IPO and to float, I would say, to some extent. And so why not? Maybe that's a much more modern way of approaching IPO. So that's it. But I think in the end, it comes back, like, independently from the way you exit or you get investment in the company. The main thing is you need to build a sound company.
It's how you use the money.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, right?
And you need to make sure that your accounting is clean. And if you do that well, in the end, it doesn't matter if you remain a private company, if you go to an IPO or a SPAC, basically you have a sound business, right?
Yeah. Okay, I have a very, very difficult question. How do you want the story of DOT to be remembered, and the greater scheme of, of the impact on the world, and the climate. So I'm not talking about being the most valued company, because everybody can. I mean, in our industry, it's easy to raise a lot of fund and be valued a lot. But I'm more talking about the impact aspect, because I think that is something that is also in your values. I mean, it's very clear.
Yeah.
You have a history of having very clear and straightforward values, where you care about your customers, the partners, the cities, but also the shareholders. So in a way, you maximize value for all stakeholders, and also the climate, right?
I think I don't have personally, at least world ambitions. I think it's very simple for me. Is that if I go to a city and people whether it's friends or people that I don't know or my family tell me we love basically using your shared microRT service. If I go to the city officials and they tell me we love the partnership we have with DOT. If I go to the shareholders and they are happy because we're generating a good return for them, and if I talk to our team members and they're happy to work with DOT because they learn something, or maybe they can make some extra money because of the shares that they have in DOT, then that's it. I'm happy.
So it
doesn't matter the exact scale, I would say, to some extent, even though.
What about the climate?
From a more, let's say, kind of visionary aspect, the ambition is very clear. It's if we want to be able to transform cities, to reduce massively the pollution, noise, and air pollution that exists in cities,
goal, I think, right?
if we want to make also transportation much more of a joyful thing for people in cities, the only way to achieve that is basically to make a microRT or shared microRT for us basically a massive success, right? To the point where, if it's non-walkable and if it's not, let's say, long distance trips that can be made on public transport, they go for a shared microRT solution or a microRT solution, right? But everyone is using really bikes, e-scooters, electrical bikes, maybe cargo bikes. If that happens in the city and you see everywhere people moving like that, that's success for me. That's where I'm happy.
Exactly, and that's that's where you add the value as well, right?
Yeah.
Also, in terms of expansion, besides Europe, I see some players going to Turkey, for example, or is that? Because I mean, we have already discussed it, right? The way dots expand is very. You look at the market and make sure that the money is used in an efficient way.
Yeah.
But also that you can add value locally, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you don't want to just expand to expand, because your value is, I guess, I mean, this is just my opinion. Your value is on what you add when you are there.
Yeah.
Right.
No, you're right, and so that's where we are split, right? So we have an obligation as a company to be financially sustainable. Otherwise, we cannot keep offering the service that we have. So that's why we are at this stage, at least, extremely careful at where we invest, which cities, and going really for the bigger opportunities, because our first goal, I mean, aside growing the company, is to make sure that we have a sustainable company financially.
Yep.
But after, obviously, what we are really excited also is, as you say, is cities where there is a massive transportation problem or massive pollution problem. And here, if you go outside Europe, obviously, there's Africa, there is Latin America, there's a lot of Asian countries also. There's so many big cities or cities in general where shared microRT could help solve the problem. But if you look at it, and unfortunately today at least, is a lot of the cities lack a lot of
the road infrastructure is not good.
They might also lack the purchasing power. There might be also a problem of security in these cities, and so as a company still young, 3 years old, we have to focus first on where we know yes,
the
we
market.
can make an impact, but we can also make a profit and go for the bigger opportunities after.
Yeah.
Once we are really solid, we might go to other cities.
Yeah, and exactly. I mean, and Europe is actually the perfect, market to start because it has a lot of mobility issues, but it also has most of the cities have good infrastructure, and they have the purchasing power, right? So it's a good market to start. I would say. So what about let's talk about the hardware. What about the DOT e-bike, if I may ask? Is there still coming is there still a DOT e-bike coming?
Yeah, so as various people know, we were intending to design and produce our own e-bike in Europe.
Because I have a lot of high expectations, knowing how the DOT scooter was.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, so no, we had a full-blown internal development. Unfortunately, I think because we are probably still a young company, we made probably a few mistakes in the design, or our design was, let's say, too ambitious, and which made it complicated for the manufacturers to produce at the level of quality that we wanted.
Okay.
And so when we saw that, we said, okay, like if we cannot reach the level of quality that we want, we are not going to do it, because we are not in the business of
That's
producing waste.
Values, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And so it was, it was quite a tough decision, and to some extent it broke my heart a little bit at that time. But we had to make this difficult decision and say, okay, no, we are not going to launch this e-bike because it's not good enough. And so instead we say, okay, because we believe very strongly in the e-bike market, we are going to partner with other manufacturers to launch this e-bike. But we still have the goal of launching our own e-bike and e-scooter.
Sounds very excited, because now I have even higher expectations, because once it's launched, I know it's going to be. I know it's going to be
even better.
I know it's going to be good quality, because I know you will not release anything that is not good. So yeah, you have high expectations.
Definitely the goal. Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
Got the the delivery network, the charging network you wanted to touch.
Yeah, exactly.
I think after, probably it's quite long already. Now it's like
it's maybe let's do another 15 minutes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Then
it's for you also, because you don't want something too long. Yeah.
Exactly. All right. So something that I think might play a big role in the future as well is having. Obviously, you want to have control over the software, hardware, the operations. But what about the charging network and the charging hubs? Because that plays a big role in terms of the cost when it comes to the operations, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But when I look at the model that now is being presented, it does not make that much sense, because I think the e-scooter is a premium option, which is, we discussed this on the previous podcast with Prabin as well. So I'm not sure if people would actually go to a store to save €1 to replace a battery, if the scooter is a premium option.
So here you are talking about the charging network,
exactly.
like Tier is doing, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, at this stage, we think it's a very interesting business model. But to be honest, we don't believe in the distributed charging network. And there are several reasons for that. One, I think there is a safety concern. When you have batteries which are, allocated, just a few of them in hundreds, if not thousands of small stores, which on top of that are located, generally speaking, in residential areas. Batteries, accidents happen, fires happen. And so I think there is a very significant risk when it comes to safety if you apply this model. So I think that's the first thing. The second aspect is the user one. As I think you alluded, is like, okay, like how many of these batteries are going to be really swapped by the user. And our thinking is that actually it's a minority. And the reason, as you said, is like, okay, if there's a €1 gain, like our shared micromobility service, why do we do that? It's a service to simplify the life of people so that they can really easily go from A to B without, overthinking about it.
Exactly.
If the thing is that, okay, I have to go from A to B, but actually I have to go to C to, unlock the battery, put it in a store, come back with a new battery, load it, and then continue for a €1 gain. I honestly think that some people might do it, but definitely not the majority. Yep. And the problem with that is that if that's the case, that only a minority of users will do it, then it means that you still have actually to maintain operations to do all the battery swapping in-house, right? Or at least with your own operations. And so this means that suddenly you have to have on one side your own in-house operations to maintain, to do the battery swapping, and then you have to have all the organization with all the stores to do this. Yep. So that means double cost from an operation perspective. The third aspect is, if you want to have this charging delivery network, because of the dispersion of the batteries, you need a lot more batteries.
It only makes sense if it's available on a lot of locations, right?
My calculation, might be right or wrong, but it's probably you need double batteries compared to the number of vehicles that you have if you have a distributed network. Whereas if you do it internally, you probably, with 30% or something like that, 40%, whatever, you're fine. So there's a huge extra cost basically when it comes to the batteries. And I could go on, and then there's the complexity of the app where you have to manage all the separate experience to swap the batteries. You have also to manage all the network of stores, which is and
the insurance aspect.
And so so you get into that, and it gets very complicated and very costly. And I have a hard time to see how to make it profitable. And not even talking about the initial problem, which for me is a crucial one, which is fire safety.
Security.
Right?
It's basically it's a new company that you might need to start just to do that, right?
Yeah, you're right.
Wow.
But it's great that Tia is doing it. Yeah. At least maybe they will find something. We'll learn from them, and if that's the case, amazing.
Yeah. But what would be like an alternative? Do you think for like battery swapping? Or I know Dots will always do it in house because you have your own people. But not everybody is like Dots, right?
No. Yeah. Honestly, I don't know. I think one side there's probably going to be a lot coming on the battery technology itself. So there are tons of companies, startups working on new types of batteries and increasing the efficiency. And so if you manage to increase the efficiency of the battery, it will mean by nature that you need to do a lot less swaps, right? Yep. I think there will be ways also to make the vehicles themselves more energy efficient, so that you need to use less energy per kilometer or per ride.
Exactly.
The e-bikes are a good example of that, where there's a ton you can do actually to optimize energy consumption. And so I think, when an e-scooter could probably do, let's say, 40 kilometers, right? I think we'll end up with vehicles that can do, 100, 200 kilometers basically without a swap. And that's going to be already a huge gain.
Exactly.
Then I think there will be probably innovative models, but we have not found them yet.
Well, actually, when we look at, because the goal is to have like operational efficiency, right?
Yeah.
When we look at the business model aspect, we discussed it in the car. Bird has franchise models, right? And I think in that way they can cut their cost. I'm not sure in how much.
But the franchisee model is the same, right? In effect, it's the same type of operations. It's just that you outsource it to other people, which probably will do a less good job than when you do it yourself, right? Because of all the learnings and so on.
Exactly. But I think with the franchisee model, I'm not sure. The entrepreneurs have like an upfront fee or purchase the scooters or something. Mm-hmm. And they do the operations. Yeah. And then Bird takes whatever percentage they take. So I guess, it's good that companies are looking at ways to.
Yeah, you're right, but again, it's just outsourcing the problem or the cost, right? The labor,
it's outsourcing, like you
the
said.
work that is involved to do it still exists. The only question is how efficient you are at doing it, and is it more efficient to do it in-house or outsource? And my belief, at least as you understood from the beginning, is it's more efficient to do it in-house because of all the learnings you accumulate, the fact that you can use these learnings to improve your software, and eventually do it much more efficiently than any outsourced or third party, right?
Yeah, exactly. Actually, that really illustrates the type of company Dot is, because I was just thinking about, not having the cost, as a company, but you thought about the fact that the work is still there and the cost is still there. So that really illustrates that you care about the actual, efficiency.
Yeah.
So whether it's outsourced or not, the efficiency needs to be there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So that's right. Obviously, I'm very happy that you joined. It's been a crazy ride since the early 2018 to what it is now when I look at the industry. I want to ask you like a last question. What do you think about the smaller companies? Because obviously you have a lot of smaller operators that won a lot of tenders in the UK actually, and they are coming up. Some are going to the east of Europe, and I just want to know what do you think about these smaller companies that are, in a way, when they win a tender like the ones in the UK, those tenders are quite valuable, I think. So they have a certain value.
Yeah.
So they do play a role in that market, at least a big role. But what is your opinion on that? And how do you see this evolving? Because
I mean, first, like, everyone that is in the industry and that is passionate and is aiming basically to make people move to bikes or e-scooters or micro-mobility vehicles. To some extent, they are all my friends, right? Because we are all working for the same purpose, right?
Exactly.
After, I think from an industry perspective, I think it's very clear that the more we progress, the more the product requirements to operate, especially in the big cities, will be higher, because there are all these requirements in terms of parking, in terms of safety, in terms of data sharing, and even for that, actually, it takes a lot of resources to develop all the functionalities that are required for the cities. So what I suspect is that on one side, you will have a set of big operators which will be able to really efficiently apply and operate in multiple cities. Yep. Because they have the means to develop all the products that are required for that, invest in CapEx and so on. Exactly, and the ability to replicate. And then there will be indeed a small local operators which either will remain independent, great for them, or will want to join some of the bigger operators, maybe selling their license at whatever value they think is right. If they see a fit with the bigger operators, right?
Okay, makes sense.
But I think that's the direction I see overall, and we see these trends already happening, right?
Exactly.
Recently, Wind sold its licenses in a fragmented way, and there were quite a few other operations like that. But the market is still going to remain partially fragmented because of this city aspect, right, and these standards. So
I think there's still a lot of opportunity in this market, especially in East Europe as well. There's still a lot of cities that want to have, micromobility there, but so there's still a lot of opportunity for everybody.
For sure.
I want to end it here. I'm very, very happy that you came to the podcast. It's an honor. I am extremely looking forward to the Dot bike. Now I really want to know. I mean, maybe let's discuss it after the podcast. But now I want to know about the Dot e-bike. And I want to thank you and your team for really sticking to your values and really, having clear values and not shifting for that. And I think that's one way that you differentiate. And I'm sure you will be one of the. I mean, you are already one of the biggest, but I think if you have the right values. So yeah, I mean, a great company. So thank you very much for coming on the early days of Micromobility podcast. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Constantine. It was a great pleasure.
Thank you.